Thank you, Bob, for agreeing to this interview. It's a privilege to engage with you in this way, particularly after the talk that you gave in the course and your chapter in the book. I wonder, to begin with, if you could tell me a little bit about your early life, your upbringing, your early family life, and what led to your interest and career in geophysics.
Well, I grew up in the Midlands of England, and I remember spending most of my time outdoors on a bicycle, cycling around the lanes of Leicestershire. Something I'd be terrified of my children doing nowadays, but there wasn't so much traffic then. So I was always outdoors in scouts and things, going hiking and walking and so on. Conventional family church going, went to church every Sunday. I couldn't tell you a single sermon. I can't recall any of them. In fact, I spent a lot of time looking in the back of the Book of Common Prayer, which has this formula for calculating Easter, which fascinated me.
Tell us that.
Well, of course, it's all to do with the phases of the moon,
Right.
because it was based on that from the Jewish background.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realise that at the time, and the formula was not stated in an equation, but in words. Right. So, actually, I think instead of listening to sermons, I'd look at that every week. Yes. Anyway, so I did all that, came to Cambridge to do natural sciences, which is a whole range of subjects. And here met people who lived just down the corridor from me who believed that they could talk to Jesus, actually, which I thought was a bit weird at the time, to be honest, because I thought he died 2,000 years ago. But they were really nice people, and they took me along to church and so on. And what I realised eventually was they had a real living faith, whereas I didn't. And I suppose that's when I would mark becoming a Christian in my own name, if you like, actually making a commitment, was to those friends who took me along to church in Cambridge 50 years ago.
So you were already studying sciences, the natural sciences, when that was going on?
Yes.
Did becoming a Christian ever pose a challenge to your thinking?
Not at all, really. I mean, if God is the creator of the world, and I've actually now been paid for a whole career to study the world, I mean, I have an enormous privilege in studying his creation and paid to do it. And I must say about the Christian faith as well, that I understood some of it then, and actually it's just made more and more sense every year.
Right.
For 50 years or so now, that it makes more sense. It explains why I'm the way I am, why the world's the way it is, why people behave the way they do. So it just makes more sense year by year. And I think probably my science is the same. The more I do, the more I realise I don't know in the scientific arena, and the more amazing the creation is. So I've never felt any conflict between them at all, actually. Quite the opposite, actually.
I mean, the reason I ask is, for many Christians, they say it does, or it did, and that particularly the issue of evolution, and the age of the earth and things like that, the dinosaurs and relative to human life, that was never a problem for you?
Not to me, but I suspect it's perhaps not very good teaching from their churches, to be honest, because when you read the Bible, there's nothing in it that, well, it's not a scientific textbook, there's nothing particular in it that says whether the dinosaurs lived or didn't live. There's not even much about the age of the earth, because most of the history that's recorded is from the time of humans on. And it works really well, you know, for the past 10,000 years there was agriculture, there were cities, there were people doing it. Secular people are even recorded in the Bible in some places. Some of the Persian kings and functionaries, their names are there in the Bible, and it fits with what we know from history. So the Bible's really reliable in historic terms, I think, from the time of the first humans until now. But the bit before that, when there were no humans, that's just the 13,000 million years before that. The Bible doesn't really say much about it, other than God made it, and he meant to make it, and it was the way he meant to make it. So, so I've never really felt a conflict in that area as well. And I think you only do if you start to read the Bible as a scientific textbook, which it it isn't.
It
was written
designed to be.
It's written 2 millennia and more before science was even thought of as a systematic method of looking at the world.
Now, one of the privileges of you doing the work you've done is that it's taken you to some pretty spectacular locations around the globe, and having Christian beliefs, going to these spectacular places, has that helped you appreciate the earth as both a theological and scientific phenomenon, or no?
Yes, of course it has from time to time. I mean, a lot of what I'm doing when I'm working somewhere is just hard work.
Sure.
Trying to make some instrument work when it won't work properly because it's got flooded or something. But there's just those moments, and I can remember a few of them. One in the South African veldt where there was just a black sky peppered with stars. And it just felt awesome in the proper sense of the word, in awe-inspiring. And more recently in Iceland, when I was looking one way at a volcanic eruption, there was crimson flames going 100 metres into the air as rocks were thrown out, molten rocks, and turned round and there was amazing black sky with Aurora Aureolis showing with all those amazing lights, greens and purples going across it. So I thought, this is great, this is both things at once.
Quite a light show.
It was a light show, yes. And a noise show actually. Eruptions are incredibly noisy, they're like jet engines and you don't quite realise that. But I think most people experience that just occasionally, and it might not be being outdoors, it might be a great piece of music or a great piece of poetry or something.
This capacity for awe.
Yeah, and this capacity for feeling there's something here more than just the material, you know, there's something about God's awesome creation is there. And that's one of the great things I look forward to in the new creation. We'll have all these things in abundance and just be able to enjoy them forever. Do
you think you will be learning new things about them?
Well, I imagine.
Do you think you'll have a job in the new creation?
Well, I hope so. You know, I think there'll be amazing volcanic eruptions, and there'll be great spectacles, and they won't hurt anybody. I think that will be the difference. So I don't see why not. I mean, it's the new creation is talked about as the earth being made how God meant it to be in the first place. So He makes all things new. He renews things. It doesn't say that He makes all new things, but He renews them and makes them new. So I think it'll be a place that we recognise that we're at home in, that we're fulfilled in. It's the sort of place we are meant to be. I suspect, I mean, we don't know, do we? But I suspect it'll be like this world, but without.
You don't know if there'll be a Cambridge University.
Well, no, there probably won't be a Cambridge University, but it'll be a great place where we're the people God meant us to be, and we can relate to one another and Him in the way He meant us to relate before we spoilt it all by turning against Him, basically, which is what we did in the Garden of Eden. So, no, I'm looking forward to that one day.
Now, you just going a step further from that, you mentioned that in the new creation there may well be the volcanic eruptions and so on. Now they do hurt people, and many of the natural hazards, as we call them, earthquakes, volcanoes and floods and so on, hurricanes, they do seem to hurt people, or people get hurt when they happen. What has taken your interest from these very wonderful things into the field of disasters, namely these wonderful things that actually cause a lot of pain, a lot of suffering? What's really drawn your attention and interest to the world of disasters?
Well, of course, professionally I'm a geophysicist, so I study earthquakes and volcanoes, that's my job. So I know quite a lot about how they work mechanically. And I'm a Christian, and so obviously the first thought that comes to mind is just what you said. How can a loving, sovereign God allow this sort of suffering that results from these things? And I think there's a much more nuanced answer than no, God can't exist because He allows suffering, or why didn't God intervene? And of course I don't know the answers. People have been looking for answers since humans have existed and thought about these things. But I think there are some things you can say about it. And the first thing is that these things that often are hazardous, so floods, volcanoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, they're actually what make the Earth a habitable, fertile place where humans can thrive. And to be honest, if it weren't for these things, it would be a sterile world. There'd probably be no humans here. And so it's this dynamic Earth that actually makes it possible to live here. So, for example, volcanoes bring up nutrients, which we rely on for growing food and so on. But volcanic islands particularly are some of the most biodiverse areas on Earth. They're so rich, so fertile, so you depend on that. Floods are what bring the soils over the banks of the river. Particularly in Egypt, you can see this in the ancient days. If the floods failed, then people would starve the next year. Now nowadays, of course, that's not such a problem because we have irrigation. But people sometimes suffer from floods because they build their houses in floodplains and so on. So these things are good actually in the world at the basis. They're what make the world fertile. So what goes wrong is with it when humans interact badly with them, and that's the interesting part of.
So you don't see these natural phenomena as being products of the what theologians would call the fall.
Yeah, no, not at all. Because and the reason I don't is partly because they're what make the world fertile. And when God looked at it, he said it was a very good world. But also because as a geologist I can look back at the history of the Earth from way before humans ever lived on it, which is just the last little fraction of its history. And there were floods there, and there were volcanoes, and there were earthquakes, because you can see the results of them. There were all these things going on before the fall. So I think the fall is not to do with changing the physical nature of the world so much as to changing the relationship that humans have, firstly with God and then with the world, with God the Creator and the world His creation. So that's what's gone wrong, and I think that's why it says in the Bible that after the fall, growing food would be a toil and a struggle, rather than something naturally where we're well bonded or understanding the environment in which we're living properly. And it all stems really from humans rebelling against God, saying, I want to do it my way, not your way. I want to be in charge, thank you God, not you. And I'm afraid we've made a mess of being in charge. We're not very good at it in all sorts of ways.
What do you see therefore as being the responsibility, if you like, or the level of responsibility that the Christian church has toward the natural environment?
It's amazing to me that actually there's any debate about it, because if we're Christians we believe in the Creator God, that He made this creation, so surely if we want to please God we should look after His creation and live in it in the way He meant us to be, which actually was the very first command He gave us back in Genesis 1. We should be have dominion over the world. You know, it needs ordering, it needs looking after. We should have that dominion on His behalf, was more or less what He's saying. So we should rule over it, even, if you want to put it that way, but for the sake of pleasing God and for the sake of others, not for our own personal gain, and it's that last bit that we've done wrong, I think. So, yes.
Thank you. I'd like just to move now from your career and your Christian interest to the other aspect of your life, the Faraday Institute itself. Here we are in the heart of academia, as it were, in Cambridge University, which had its origins, of course, in Christian traditions, but is now widely accepted as, like so many universities, certainly in the UK and Europe, a largely secular institution. So what drew you to think of establishing an institution with an avowedly Christian ethos, like the Faraday Institute, for science and religion is. What drew you to think you could establish something like that within the renowned academic environment with its secularity of the University of Cambridge?
Well, let me say first that it's still in the statutes of the University of Cambridge.
Right.
That we do this for the glory of God.
That's an achievement.
Yeah, well, it's been there a long time. Things change slowly in Cambridge. And I still have to sign a book when I got a job on the staff to say I would uphold that. And at the Royal Society, which is the premier, some would say, scientific institution in the world, certainly the oldest, also in its foundation documents from Charles II said that he's setting up this society for the glory of God and for the good of humankind. You know, that was the reason people were doing science, to help humankind. So it's been there right at the beginning, actually, as you said about the university.
Yes.
So what about our secular age? Well, the reason really for setting up the Faraday Institute was to talk to my tribe of scientists and say, you don't have to throw your brain out of the window to become a Christian. These things, faith and science, go together actually really well.
Yeah.
And actually I think they explain the world better than either on its own. Faith without science can be a bit spiritualised, if you like, and a bit out of touch with reality. Science without faith just misses a whole dimension to the things you're looking at. Just look at the material. So we set up the institute not in a divinity faculty, not in a theological faculty, on purpose, because we want to reach our own tribe of scientists, really. Right. And if it came out of a theology department, they would say that, wouldn't they? And probably ignore it. So maybe we have a bit more credibility by being independent. It's not that I have any low opinion of theology, quite the opposite.
Yes.
But it was just to take away that temptation that it would give an excuse for not taking us seriously, if you like. And so the leaders of the Institute have mostly been active Christians, well-known internationally Christians. So scientists, I should say, well-known internationally. So people can't turn around and say, well, you're not a real scientist.
Sure.
So they say, yeah, well, you do good science and you're a Christian as well. So they might just take you a little bit more seriously. But that was our aim anyway, just to show that these things, science and faith, are perfectly happy going together, and in fact go together extremely well and give you a better view of the world. So.
And the fact that the Faraday has been going, what now, 13 years?
Yeah, 13 years.
Do you feel it's stood up credibly to that aim?
Well, who knows what impact you're having on people, because you often don't hear, do you? But I just, funnily enough, the other day I was down in Tasmania giving a talk, and somebody said, oh, that series you did, Faraday, that was Test of Faith series you did. Oh, that's really good. We're using it in our home group.
Right.
And you know, you'd never know this normally. So I hope we're sowing some seeds that are helpful to people. But certainly we've got massive resources on the web, because right from the beginning we took the idea that we would get the best speakers we could on any topic, and we'd record them, like we're recording this, and we put it on the web for free for anybody to download. And so there's, I forget now, 700 or so lectures on the web, and I think probably they are having quite a big impact. I think it's the biggest resource for that sort of material for science and faith talks in the world now, so it is being well used for that, and I'm pleased about that.
Very good. Now, finally, just given recent developments with the Faraday Institute becoming more of an independent institution, as it were, still within the Cambridge Theological Foundation, within the University of Cambridge, what's your vision for the future of Faraday?
Well, one thing we can do by moving just a little bit further from the college context is that we can do work with schools and youth and churches, which was a little bit more difficult before because of the aims of colleges are more academic. It's not that we want to stop doing academic work. We're still doing research, and we hope we're hitting important issues, ethical issues like artificial intelligence and so But it does enable us to do more outreach events. And I really hope that we can resource across the board, if you like. So we love to resource churches, because many church pastors and ministers have not had a scientific background just from where they're drawn in their early sort of careers. So it's good to bring some science in for them to be able to use. School's really important, because I think it's well known that young children make up their minds about these sort of issues when they're surprisingly young, maybe as little as young as 8 or 9, and they get stereotypes in their heads. So just say, hey, there's other ways of looking at the world than just this particular one way. So I hope that's important as well. But I hope too we'll keep reaching out to our own tribe of scientists, just saying you can be a scientist and you can be a person of faith as well. And I hope that we'll be addressing some of the really important ethical issues in research, where it's really good that we think about them before they become actual possibilities. Because, you know, scientists just love doing science and they'll push things as far as they can. Maybe we should stop and say, you know, is there a limit to human genome engineering? Are there things we shouldn't do for ethical reasons? Maybe, in my case, with a Christian background, because we're made in the image of God, does that mean there are some things that it's good to do, some things maybe we should steer clear of? And that's true across the board. The artificial intelligence I mentioned, various human genome things, how we react to the environment, how much energy, effort we should put into how we deal with the environment, and various other things. But I suspect as the years go by, different issues will be to the fore, and I hope we'll be nimble enough in the future to start addressing those and bring a distinctive Christian perspective onto these issues, of which are important to society as a whole, particularly scientific ones. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.